Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wait. I'm trying to think of because we always do the same song. So let's try to figure out a different song that we can do here. Um, look how we light up the chat with songs and stories of Disney. It's there we go. Ray from Princess and the Frog. No, I don't know why I said it like that. As if everyone's like in the chat room, like, what's that from? How's everyone doing? It's still loading, saying that it shows we got 2 people on right now, but no one's talking yet. So hopefully everyone out there is doing well. Hopefully it's connecting right now well for everyone. I was driving home hey, howdy, hey, welcome to the practice round. So I left Magic Kingdom today, and when I left Magic Kingdom, the monorail was down. Hello. So I left Magic Kingdom, and the monorail was down, and so I had this family that was in front of me, and they were walking so slow to the ferry boat because like the ferry boat was the only option, and the captain was like, "Last call, last call." I'm like, "Guys, we can make it, we can make it," and they're like, "No, they'll wait for us." And I'm like, "No, they won't," but they wouldn't let me pass. So I missed the boat by literally 2 people, and then I got stuck. Hey. I got stuck waiting for the next ferry boat, and then that took forever too. And I just wanted to get food and get over here. And then when I got here, I was like, because everything was like not lining up correctly, and I was like, oh, I know, hola. I had this gut feeling that my internet was not going to work, but luckily, knock on wood, it was working when I got home. Hopefully, I didn't just jinx us and have it so it's not going to be working later on. How's everyone doing? Are you guys doing good? that was the most pointless story I've ever told. it had a beginning, a middle, and not a very exciting end. Is everyone doing good out there? Hopefully everyone's doing well. Today we're going to be talking all about Disney. Like we've done the last few weeks, we're going to let you guys decide what we're going to talk about because I've really enjoyed doing this format. I just think it's fun. I like the challenge of like there's going to be times obviously where we'll have like a specific topic that we're going to talk about. Like for instance, when we do like a Run Disney weekend, or if like we do a cruise and we talk about the cruise afterwards. But I also like having it so when we don't have anything special going on, like right now, that we can kind of have it so you guys make the decisions on what we're going to be talking about. So before we get into our show tonight, let's give you guys 3 choices. And while I go through our intro, you guys are going to be voting for the 3 choices on which one you would like to have us go through. And the sad thing is I only have 2 choices on the top of my head right now. So the third one is going to be completely random. So we have continuing our Disney 100 series where we talk about things that happen in each year throughout the first 100 years of the Disney company. 2, go into one of our old classics, Ask Me Ask the Expert, where you're going to throw your questions out there and ask me anything and everything about Disney, and we'll go through and answer your questions. And 3, I was hoping that something would come to me. Let's look around the room real quick here. I looked at Herbie. I was like, "Oh, Herbie!" But we literally did that. That was what you guys chose 3 weeks ago. Let's do. Oh, if anyone out there has a suggestion, throw the suggestion out. Otherwise, we're just going to randomly choose something. The history of. I don't know if this is going to be a good idea, but we're going to. The history of and the backstories of Journey into Imagination with Figment. Okay, so choose between those 3. Which topic would you like to have tonight? Ask me anything, or ask me a Disney, or Ask the Expert, Disney 100 Years, or Journey into Imagination, the history and stuff. I have a Figment statue, like one of the Fab 50 statues of that over there, and that's what threw that other one out there. So before we get started, let's do our show here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 718th episode of the Wednesday Show. Today is May 24th, 2023, and I'm your host, as always, Brent Dodge. Hello. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the topics that you guys are voting for right now in the comments, and you guys should be voting right now because you have until I finish doing our intro to figure out what we're going to be talking about. But of course, before we get to whatever we're talking about, let's talk about our news for the week. First off, and thank you everyone who's been joining us for our Saturday in the Park. If you didn't already know, every single Saturday right here on the YouTube channel, we do a live broadcast from someplace found throughout the Walt Disney World Resort. This past Saturday, we came live from the Seas with Nemo and Friends, and next week, who knows where we're going to be coming from, but I guarantee you we will be coming to you live from Disney. So make sure you join us every single Saturday right over on my YouTube channel at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. We always have a lot of fun. So make sure you join us every single Saturday for that. Also, speaking of my YouTube channel, if you have not already figured it out, every single day we are doing a brand new Disney YouTube video. So we also have a full one, and then we also have the YouTube shorts as well. So make sure you're checking those out every single day and give them a like, comment, and all that other fun stuff as well. Speaking of which, if you guys want to go into extra innings tonight, well, then you got to send your friends over here. Let's see what our starting numbers are for subscribers tonight. We are starting off at 2,847 subscribers. Not bad. We were at 2,820 last week, right? Yeah. So that's what, an average about 4 a day. So keep throwing your friends over this way. And yeah, we're actually 3 away from 2,850, and then we're only 150 away from hitting the coveted 3,000. So keep on throwing your friends over and tell them to subscribe. And if they don't subscribe, then you need to find new friends. Also, as always, tonight's episode is sponsored by It's All About the Mouse Travel Jazz Hands. Make sure you stop by. It's allaboutthemousetravel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All their services are absolutely positively 100% free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. All right, so far only 2 people have voted, and there's like 12 of you who are watching right now. So we need more votes. So throw in there the 3 options again for the show tonight is Disney 100 Years, Ask the Expert, or the history of the Figment and the Imagination Pavilion. So we'll give you guys a few. We'll do 1 full minute of waiting for any possible votes. Right now, we do have 1 vote for Figment. We also have 1 vote for the 100 Years. So we'll give you guys up until my clock has 8 minutes and 30 seconds into the thing. You guys can't see that clock, so I don't know where I'm pointing at it, but it's right here on my side. Okay, we get another 100 Years vote. So right now, 100 Years is in the lead. You've got 35 seconds left to throw your votes out there. By the way, for those of you guys who might be wondering, like, could he pull off a Figment episode when he literally just looked around the room? I could do a Figment episode. So if that's one of the reasons why you're hesitant about voting for Figment, I promise you, I will make it interesting and entertaining. All that other fun stuff. Actually, I don't know if anyone remembers, but we did do an interview with Ron Schneider. I was going to say Rob Schneider, but that's Adam Sandler's friends. Ron Schneider years ago, who was the Dream Finder. And by the way, time is up. So we are going to be doing a 100 Years episode tonight. But anyways, we had Ron Schneider on here, and he talked about how he was the voice of the Dream Finder and his whole path of that. And he actually has a book out called From Dreamer to Dream Finder. It's a really good book. I've never read it before. Okay, so if you guys have never joined us for our 100 Years before, this is how we do it. This is how we do it. First off, we make sure that we have a pen. Where did my pen go? I always have a pen right here, and I misplaced my pen. It's on the ground. That's a different pen, but whoa, look at this pen. Downtown Disney. And then you click it, and it switches phrases. It says, "You rock. Awesome. Great job. Wow. Downtown Disney. You rock." That's pretty cool. Okay, so if you've never joined us for our Disney 100 series before, what we're going to be doing is you guys are going to be choosing the years. If we've already done one of the years, then we're not going to be talking about that specific year. But what we're going to be doing is going through every single year from 1923 all the way until 2023 and talking about the historical impact that each one of those years had in the Disney company. So far we've done about 15 to 20 years. So now we're going to continue our time. Throw out our first year, anyone and everyone. First one that pops up to the chat room, that's going to be the year that we go into. But if it is a year that we've already done, we will not. Oh, we'll be skipping it, and we'll go to the next year that someone else has thrown out there. So let's do this thing. I'm also going to pull up my notes because I didn't know we were going to do this episode. That's on my notes. Where are my notes? There it is. Okay. So our first year that came out was 1998. 1998 was a great year for the Disney company, in my personal opinion. But let's talk about 1998. It's one of those years that I do vividly remember a lot about for Disney. I'm losing my note there. Okay, where's my notes? I need to see the year 1998. 1998, that's 95. Oh, I put those out of order. Okay, 1998. So let's start us off with some movies. Okay, so the first thing, whenever I hear 1998 with Disney, even though Disney's Animal Kingdom opened up that year, the first thing I always think about is Mulan. I don't know why I think about Mulan before I think about Disney's Animal Kingdom or the cruise line, but for some reason, Mulan is the first thing I go to. Now, let's talk a little bit about Mulan and the history of Mulan, because I think Mulan actually has one of the most fascinating histories that a lot of people just don't realize. So if you remember, have we talked about 1989? We've not talked about 1989 yet. In 1989, whenever we get there, we will talk a lot about, this pen doesn't work. It does tell me cool phrases, but it does not actually work. I have so many pens here. I just don't understand why you can't find one that works. 1990, there we go. So when Disney MGM Studios first opened up in 1989, one of the main things that they were doing was actually having it so it was a living, breathing, working studio. So we actually had a lot of different live action films that were actually going to be filmed there. We had some filmed there, not a whole lot as like they had originally planned. However, there are some different scenes from different films that if you go down to the streets of America, you would have been able to notice different ideas or different things that were touched on in these different films. There were some films that were completely filmed there, like The Lottery Ticket, which was a short film starring Bette Midler, right? I want to say it was Bette Midler. Really good film if you've never seen it, but it's a really good film. And if you watch it, just go Google it. Sometimes it's a short film, but go just search on YouTube for The Lottery Ticket. And it completely takes place on the streets of America. Fascinating film, especially if you've ever been to the streets of America. You're like, oh my gosh, I remember all these buildings. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the animation side of it. Now, when they were working on the animation building, they had so at first a lot of the different like in-between artists were there, or maybe some of the background artists were there, but they didn't actually have a full-length feature film created at the animation building until a few years later. And the very first one that they came out with that was completely done here at the Magic Disney Animation was Mulan in 1998. We actually had 3 different films that were created inside of this building. We had Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, and then also Brother Bear. Those 3 were completely created there. And then there's other ones that were not completely created there, but they were kind of, some parts were there and some parts were other spots. Are we having internet connections? I feel like we might be having internet connections. Maybe. I'm not positive. I have an error on my screen, and I just I'm not sure if other people are having the error or if it's just my side. Hopefully I'll just keep on talking, and because we've got 2 years that are up. So Mulan came out in 1998. All of it was completed here at Disney MGM Studios. Also, if you've ever watched Mulan, then you can go through. Seems okay to me. Okay, I hope so. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, there's a little error message that's on my screen right now, and it's also showing that we have 0 followers or 0 people who are watching. Even though I think maybe we have people watching. Hopefully, I mean, you just wrote, so we have at least 1. So the things just lying to me. So yeah, we had Mulan, and then we also had a few other things, but that's besides the point. So in addition to that, we also got our second Pixar film, which would be A Bug's Life, would come out this year. In addition to that, we also had a Touchstone label, which was also owned by Disney, which was Armageddon. Armageddon actually would go off to inspire a few different things around the Disney parks around the world, including an attraction that is found over at Walt Disney Studios Park, that the sister park of Disneyland Paris. And then on top of that, we also had The Parent Trap, starring Lindsay Lohan and Lindsay Lohan. But that was just like that. That's just a little bit of the stuff that they did. Also, this year we had so many other things that would come out. Our first big one, of course, Disney's Animal Kingdom would open up in April 22nd of 1998. It would open up with the Oasis, Discovery Island, Camp Minnie Mickey, Africa, Dinoland USA, and of course, the wonderful, wonderful Tree of Life. We did a whole story or a whole episode about this just literally last month when we were celebrating the 25th anniversary. 25th anniversary of Disney's Animal Kingdom. So we're not going to go into too much else about it, but we also had it so during this time in 1998 we would open up our first ever cruise ship, which would be the Disney Magic. The Disney Magic would set sail on July 30th, right? Yeah, July 30th. July 30th of that year. And of course, at that time, it was really unknown whether or not it was going to be a huge hit or not. Of course, it ended up being a massive hit. Since then, we've got the Disney Wonder, the Disney Dream, the Disney Fantasy, and the Disney Wish as well. I was drawing a blank on the Wonder for some reason. I'm not even sure why. So we went through and we had it. So we got a brand new cruise line. Now, previous to this, we did have the Big Red Boat, which was not a Disney cruise line. It was a completely different cruise line called the Big Red Boat. And Disney teamed up with the Big Red Boat to kind of test out if Disney characters would do well at sea. So the Big Red Boat had a exclusive thing for about 10 years where they actually had different Disney characters on their ships during character dining. And that was like the only time that people could actually see it. But Disney just mainly wanted to see if people would be going to these character dinings or if they would just be bypassing them because they didn't really want to meet different Disney characters. And it ended up being a huge hit. So they created the Disney Cruise Line. Also, in addition to the Disney Cruise Line, of course, we would also have Castaway Cay opening up for the very first time, opening up to guests. I'm tearing apart Jimmy. They didn't open up guests. They opened up to guests in 1998. Also that year, we got the announcement that we would be getting a brand new Disney park, but just not in the U.S. It would be Hong Kong Disneyland, which would open up a few years later. But we did have it. So the Hong Kong government, along with the Disney company, would go through and create this partnership to eventually open up Hong Kong Disneyland. And then finally, our final thing is that was also the year that Disney would launch a brand new television network. We've had several already throughout the years. We had ESPN, the Disney Channel. They owned ABC at this point. But we also got Toon Disney, which would focus solely on, you guessed it, tunes. Okay, we need another year. I've got another year here, but start throwing out other years into the chat room while we figure out our next one here. 1982 is going to be our next one, thrown out by Joanne. Okay, 1982. But keep on throwing your years out there. Whatever is the next year that we have out in the thing, as long as we have not done it, we will be going through and talking about that year. So, a few things that opened up in 1982, but nothing too big. That's a lie. We got Epcot. So October 1st, 1982. So prior to this, in 1982, not a whole lot was going on. And we did get one pretty big, amazing, super computer graphic film, which really hadn't been done up to this scale before. If you watch it now, it doesn't seem that impressive. But the sequel, I think, is pretty impressive. And of course, we just got a brand new attraction based off this film. The film, of course, being Tron. Tron would open up in 1982, and it became an immediate hit. Like, it was an absolute hit. And, of course, the video game that people would be transported into during the film would also become a huge hit all around the nation. If you went to a Pizza Hut, like our family used to do, and you'd have a little arcade section there, like my Pizza Hut used to do, you had Tron, which I used to play there. So Tron was a huge hit. causing a wave of computer geeks and video game geeks to go crazy, and it became a huge mega hit. Eventually, obviously, inspired a film that would come out 30 years later, which would be Tron Legacy. And then it would also inspire the Tron Light Cycle run over at the Magic Kingdom, which just opened up this year. When we get to 2023, because we have not guessed 2023 yet, we will talk a little bit more about that film. But we also have to talk mainly about Epcot. So Epcot, we call it Epcot, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, spelled EPCOT. Fun fact, when Walt Disney first announced it, he actually called it the Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow and not Community. And then later in the same video, he switched it up to Community of Tomorrow, even though he always referred to it as Community of Tomorrow in all of the meetings up to that point. But when he first made the announcement, he first said City, and then he switched up to Community, even though Community was the original idea. City was the one that he accidentally said first. That's a complete side story. So the idea of Epcot spawned all the way back into the mid 1960s. Actually, it's even before that. So around the time when we had the New York World's Fair taking the world by storm in 1964 and 1965, the Disney family, or Walt Disney himself, started going through and trying to figure out what kind of things that he could go forward on to create bigger and better things for the Disney company. And one of the ideas that he had was the idea of a visionary future. Because when he was at the 1964 World's Fair, he started to realize that there was all these futuristic things that you could go take a look at. Fun fact, if you've ever watched Iron Man 2, in Iron Man 2, and also, well, Iron Man 2, and then also in the first Captain America film, they go to the World's Fair in New York. And in New York's World's Fair during these films, it's fictionalized, but you have it so there's all these different ideas of what the future would possibly look like if, you know, scientists could kind of go ahead and have whatever they wanted to create. So when Walt wanted to come up with the idea of Epcot, he decided that what he wanted to do was use this idea of the World's Fair and all the different things that he learned during the World's Fair and have it so it would be this idea of having a city where people could live and work and breathe and eat and socialize and all that other fun stuff, but not have it so that's just this sole purpose of it. But it would also have it so it was a constant World's Fair. So anyone and everyone in the world could come to this location and they could showcase different ideas that they had for the future, and they could actually utilize it there in the city to try to figure out if it would work in the big city structures or not. So with this idea, he wanted to create his very own city right here, like literally right down the road from here, and have it so people could actually live and work and eat and dine and have a great old time and live their whole life right here in a massive city that'd be multi-level. So you'd have one level that was just for transport, you would have another level that was just for business, and then you would have another level that was just for leisure. That's kind of a crazy idea, but that's the idea that he had for Epcot. Now, of course, Walt Disney would pass away in 1966, and the idea of Epcot still lived on, but eventually they started to realize that maybe you couldn't come up with the idea of Epcot completely because Walt Disney was not around to actually, pioneer it the way that he wanted to pioneer it. So what they decided to do was, I forgot my water today, by the way. I'm like really bummed because my mouth is starting to get dry because I'm talking a lot. But he wanted to have it so he would go through and pioneer this idea. So because he had passed away, they're saying, okay, maybe we can't do exactly what Walt wanted, but maybe we can have it so we can take some inspiration from what he got inspiration from to create our very own place to really showcase the entire world and showcase brand new ideas. And so that was the idea for Epcot when it first originally opened up. So the idea was to have it so there was two different parts of Epcot. There was going to be a World Showcase and there was going to be a Future World. World Showcase would allow people to see what the world was like all around the world in different countries. And they would have different representatives from these different countries come over and actually be able to allow people who are visiting learn a little bit more about their cultures in Mexico or Canada or Morocco or Norway, China, Japan, UK, France, I got Germany, Italy, or the American Adventure. I couldn't just stop because I felt bad if I all of a sudden left one out and said all the other ones. So when they started to go through and come up with this idea, they wanted to have it so there was going to be this world showcase where they could go through and showcase the world to people, and people could come in and learn a little bit about the world and how the world around the world ticks, and not just the place that they're from, whether they're from America or they're from someplace else around the world. It was able to have it so the entire world could become more of one, kind of like how Walt had it during the New York World's Fair. So during the New York World's Fair, what a lot of people don't realize is, there was things like It's a Small World, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, um, Carousel of Progress, etc., etc., etc. You would have all these different things, but one of the things that Walt saw at this fair was there was also these things about different cultures, different countries, different everything, and Walt loved that. Walt loved to have it so he could go through the different booths and learn a little bit about other places around the world and have it so that enhanced his own personality. So the Imagineers said, you know what, we're going to take this idea of a world showcase and enhance the world around us so everyone can learn a little bit about these different cultures. So that was one part of it. Then the other part of it was going to be I've also realized that this is like turning into like a massive Epcot episode, even though we are talking about the years. Also, keep throwing the years down into the chat because right now 1982 is the last one that we have. So he also would go through and they wanted to have it so they would create a future world. Now, with Future World, there was a few different things that would come about. Our first one that we're going to talk about is Spaceship Earth. So the idea of Spaceship Earth kind of came with the idea of the sphere that was found in the center of all of the New York World's Fair, but it was enhanced a lot. So they decided that they were going to have it so it would take place or take you on a ride through communication throughout the entire world, while also, once again, showcasing that all of us are on the planet together in a spaceship, aka Spaceship Earth. It was Earth. We're all on the same Earth together. We're technically in a spaceship together, traveling through space, all together on this planet, and showing how people communicate all around the world and how that ties us all together. In addition to that, they wanted to have it so they could showcase different futuristic ideas. So they had things like Communicore, where Communicore would allow us to see different futuristic ideas that were coming every single day. In fact, Communicore was updating constantly. Some of the things that people learned in Communicore were things like the internet. Before the internet became a household thing, you could learn a lot about the internet. They also had things like doing things like video calls, aka like Zoom or FaceTime, all the different things that we see and know today. They had that back in the 1980s. In fact, actually, if you go back to second grade, so 1992. In 1992, you go to second grade, right? My second grade, not your second grade. Maybe your second grade, but it would be kind of creepy. And you went to your Boy Scouts meeting at Andy Hahn's house, and you went down to the basement. His dad had set up a computer and a video recorder and a little phone, and then another one on the other side of the room. And we did this. Like, we learned how to do FaceTime back in 1992. And he was like, "This is the future," and I was like, "Whoa, the future's amazing!" And then I got disappointed because it didn't come around as quickly as I thought it was going to do. But it did eventually come down. But anyways, also in 1992, we also got a few more attractions with that. We would get things like World of Motion, Horizons, the Wonders of Life Pavilion, Body Wars, or not Body Wars, that wasn't around yet. Figment, and then the Land Pavilion and the Seas Pavilion. So we had a lot of different things that came to Epcot when Epcot first opened up, but we just took a lot of time in the year 1982. So let's move on to our next year here. Again, if you guys want to have it so a specific year is mentioned, throw your ideas down into the comments below and we will talk about it. In fact, that was the only two things that came out in 1982, but we just talked a lot about it, Tron and the opening of Epcot. That was also the year that was it Pepsi or Coke? I think it was Coke. Tried to buy the Disney company, and Disney said, "No way, Jose." And so Disney did not be purchased. Okay, 2006 is the next one that we have. If you guys want to have it so there's a year mentioned, throw your year down. Let's talk a little bit about 2006. Let's mark it off our thing here. We got our notes. Okay, let's start us off by talking a little bit about the films that would come out in 2006. We had three films that took the world by storm in completely different ways. One of them ended up leading into one of the biggest franchises and actually one of the biggest money makers that Disney and Pixar ever had. That was Cars. Cars came out in 2006 and was an immediate hit. In fact, it had spawned 2 more films, 2 different short series cartoons, and then a whole lot of other short series things, which we're not even talking about. And then on top of that, we also got, I don't have any near me. They're over on that shelf. A line of different toys that were all focused around cars. With the idea of cars, everything kind of took off in this world, and Cars actually became the #1 moneymaker for the entire Disney company. In fact, if you wanted to have it so you made some money in Disney in 2006, all the way up until current days, what you want to do is have a Cars franchise, and things are going to take off like crazy. In the film, we have Lightning McQueen along with Sally Tomater, and so many other members of Radiator Springs going around on a journey of self-discovery, where Lightning McQueen goes through and he is going to have it so he's going to be the next big racer in the entire world. He is a rookie racer for the Piston Cup, and he gets a 3-way tie with Chick Hicks along with Doc Hudson. When the 3 of them get into the 3-way tie, they decide later on that week they're going to have another competition to figure out who is actually going to be the main winner of the Piston Cup. And along the way, Lightning McQueen gets lost, but he is found. Oh, that was a good tagline. I should have used that in the movie. He was lost, but he was found. I'm going to pitch that to Disney. Speaking of franchises, we also had another franchise, but this one would be the third. The third was that Harold Dead Man's Chest. Dead Man's Chest. Dead Man's Chest. We got our second film in the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy or quadrilogy. 5. There's now 5 of them. 5-ology. In Dead Man's Chest, we have the continuation story of Captain Jack Sparrow along with Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann as they try to find the dead man's chest of Davy Jones. Along the way, laughter is had and hearts are touched. No. It's such a good movie, though. But I wouldn't say it's like the most heartfelt movie in the world, but it is a very good film if you've ever seen it. And our final film that would come out in 2006 was one that, just like Cars, it took the world by storm. In fact, in 2006, I was working at a daycare, kindercare to be specific. I was in the school-age classroom when this film came out, and let me tell you, I despised this film, mainly because of what happened because of this film. The film I now do genuinely like, but at that time, all I could hear is, "We're all in this together." That's right, High School Musical, the first High School Musical, would come out in 2006 and would completely take the entire world by storm. Like insanity. Like if you worked at a kindergarten in a school-age classroom, it was awful because all they wanted to do was listen to the soundtrack for High School Musical every single day. And it drove me crazy. Just imagine 20 kids singing every song from High School Musical every day for hours on end. It was awful. It was the worst. It was the worst. And then eventually I watched the movie because I didn't even want to watch the movie. And then I eventually watched the movie. I was like, it's a pretty good movie. High School Musical, though, would be the most successful Disney Channel original movie of all time. I believe it still is to this day. And it actually changed the entire course of Disney Channel original movies and made it so there was more and more that were coming out that would reach other levels of popularity. Things like Zombies and Descendants and all those other things. All the classics. And of course, High School Musical would also get 2 sequels, and then in addition to that, a television series on Disney+. Also, in 2006, something massive would happen. So in 2006, we would get a brand new CEO named Bob Iger. The first thing that Bob Iger did when he came to the Disney company is he said, "I can't lose Pixar. We can't lose Pixar." Michael Eisner, along with Steve Jobs, who owned Pixar, were kind of at wits' ends. They didn't really like each other, and they were completely on opposite things. And Steve Jobs kind of said, you know what, when our contract is up, which was going to be the following year, we're going to be leaving, and we're not going to have it so there are any more Pixar films at all that deal with Disney. We're going to do our own direction. And Bob Iger said, no. We are going to purchase Pixar, and we're going to have it so Steve Jobs, along with his wife, will get full credit for or not full credit. They'll get becomes majority stockholders for the entire Disney company, which they did. So Disney acquired Pixar for $7.4 billion at the start of 2006. And after that, things just kind of took off, and Pixar became it was still already a household name, but it continued to be a household name everywhere. In addition to that, we did get a lot more of High School Musical everywhere. Like there was literally High School Musical in the parks. So everywhere you went, you would be stuck hearing, "We're all in this together." And that looks like that might be all we have for 2006. So let's go to our next year here. Our next year, 1923. Again, if you guys are just joining us, we do have a few people who are joining us right now. We are going through and doing our Disney years. We're kind of going through a history of all the different Disney's, or what happened with Disney from 1923 until 2023. In each year, you guys are throwing the years at me, and I will continue to give you fun facts about each one of these specific years. So if you guys want to learn and you want to have a specific year kind of mentioned, then throw the year out there. Okay, 1923. I'm actually shocked that we have not had anyone mention 1923 yet, but I'm glad that we have, because 1923, obviously a very big year. Okay, so I know I like having the year on there so people know what year we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about what happened before 1923. So prior to 1923, the Disney company was not a company. It's that simple. Let's talk a little bit about early 1920s, though, because before Walt Disney actually created the Disney company, he was working with his own animation company called Laugh-O-Gram Studios. And with Laugh-O-Gram, they were creating these brand new cartoons. Now, the cartoons were a very clever idea, which was the Alice comedies. In the Alice comedies, he would take a little girl and put her into little girl and put her into a cartoon world. At this point, there were different movies out, and these different movies would have, or short cartoons, where it would be humans with one cartoon character. And Walt said, I like that idea, but I like the idea of switching it and having it so we have a girl being thrown into into a cartoon world instead. So that's how the Alice comedies came around. Now, the Alice comedies did come out with about 29, I want to say. I could be wrong. No, 32. It was 32 different short cartoons for the Alice comedies, starting in the early 1920s, a few years before the Disney company would actually form. And then eventually, Walt decided to move out to LA because that's where his brother Roy was living at that time. And when they moved out there, they were able to convince one of the girls who played Alice. There were a few different girls that played Alice throughout the years, but they were able to convince the one little girl, along with her family, to move out to LA with them. So with this, they decided to have it so they would start creating the cartoons on their own, opposed to using a different studio for it. And that is when they started to create the Alice comedies under the Disney Brothers logo. Now, with this, up until this point, there was not a there was not an animation studio in all of Hollywood. Walt and Roy decided they're going to go into business for themselves, because when Walt went out there, his actually first goal was to have it so he would be going out and working for a completely different company. Like, he was just like, oh yeah, I'll be an animator at one of these other companies out there, because we've got animation companies in Kansas City. So it just makes sense that there would be animation studios in LA, because LA is Hollywood, and everyone knows Hollywood has all the different movies. And when he got out there, he realized that they did not have an animation studio. He had to form his own with his brother Roy. So Walt and Roy teamed up together. Prior to this, they hadn't really worked together on anything, but at the same time, Walt was only 22 years old. So it kind of makes sense that they didn't really do anything before that. But they had never really teamed up before. But Roy was a businessman. He had gone to school and was a banker. And when he was the banker, and Walt said, you know what, you've got the financial part, I got the creative part, together we can make this thing happen. In addition to that, they did contact Iwerks. Iwerks would, of course, go on to become a massive Disney legend, and his son and his granddaughter as well. But Iwerks would come out from Kansas City with him as well, and he would start to work with the Disney company on all these different productions. So they started to form this company, and it opened up in October of 1923 which I think does baffle a lot of people, because I was talking to someone not that long ago about how, the actual anniversary of the Disney company was October 16th, right? Yeah, October 16th. October 16th is the actual first day of the 100 years. Right now, we're celebrating the 100 years, but it actually has not happened yet. And a lot of people I know have been like, "Oh no, it's happened. It happened in January." No, it didn't happen in January. It actually, October 16th, 1923 is the official first day of the entire company. Um, is that all? That's all we really have for that, because it was October. So we don't have a whole lot of happening. But yeah, we have the Alice comedies of Iwerks coming out. Virginia Davis, I want to say, was the little girl. She was the last little girl that they used. No, she was the second, third. I can't remember. But she's probably the most popular. So there you go. Okay, so that brings us into our 1923. Okay, we still have a lot of different years out there. Throw a year out there that you want us to talk about. We still have 1924, 25, 26, 27. Or no, not 28. 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48. It'd probably have been a lot easier if I just started listing off the ones that we had done. But throw out a year, any year. We still have about 15 minutes left of the show, so we can probably still get about 2 or 3 more years in, depending on which ones you actually throw at us. Also in 1923, that is also when they came up with the contract with Winkler, who we would eventually go through and sell all the stuff. So with her coming through and creating this contract with them, she actually put the loophole in 1923 to have it so she would eventually steal all of Walt's animators and the character of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit when that would all go down. All right, we got 2 years that came up. Our first one that's popped up here was 1941. Let's pull up our 1941 notes. Okay, let's cross this off. 1941. Okay, so there's a few different things that we can talk about for 1941, but I think the first one that we should talk about is not the movie that came out. I think we should lead into that afterwards, because in 1941, there was something that was going on around the world that started to affect things on the home front, and that would be World War II. So when World War II was going on over in Europe and all the different fighting was happening, there were different soldiers that were starting to be pulled from all around the world. However, one of the things that they did have to result in was a lot of people were not going to go see movies, because you could not export movies to Europe. And at that point, Europe was a very big exporter, or Disney had done a lot of exporting up until that point for different movies. At that point, we had already had Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Fantasia, and Pinocchio, and all three of them did extremely well in Europe, and it kind of helped keep the company afloat. And when the World War I was going on, World War II was going on, Walt Disney said, you know what, we can't really send these things over to Europe. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to kind of try to figure out what we're going to do to cut a few costs. And one of the things they decided to cut the cost of was giving the annual raise that they were giving to the animators up until that point. So they said, you know what, we're not going to do the raise. And because of that, the entire company went on strike again with Walt Disney. So Walt had a few different difficult choices to make. One was, do you continue to cut different costs or to cut different people out? Or two, do we have it so we go through and kind of stop making these films? There were still a few loyal different animators that would go through and stick by Walt, but they also had to create a cheaper way to create and finish films that they were already working on, including the 1941 film that they were working on, which was Dumbo. So if you go through it and watch Dumbo, you'll notice that the color scheme of Dumbo is a lot softer than a lot of the other films that were done at the time. If you look at Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and you look at Fantasia and Pinocchio, you would probably take a look at the art style and think these are very, very intricate, very, very detailed, and all of the color seems very bold and very striking and very purposeful. Dumbo, on the other hand, used watercolors. And the main reason that they used watercolors was because it was a cheaper option for them to go through and create it. A lot of people will say, well, it was to also help promote the film as a more childlike film because, it's Dumbo and it's more simplistic and it's not as Pinocchio. I think that was the exact wording that they used in the meeting too. But they said, we can't have it so we go through. and have it so it's as cost effective. So what we're going to do is we're going to create Dumbo and have it so Dumbo would go through and be a more simplistic film to save cost on all these different people who are going on strike at that point. So Dumbo ended up being a hit, and because it was a hit, they were able to actually go through and give everyone the raise, and so all the different animators would come back to work until eventually, shortly after, a lot of them would go off to war. So also in 1941, I feel like I had something else in my notes for 1941. It was something about the war. I can't think of what it was. Oh, so in 1941 also, we would have it so Roosevelt, the president at the time, Franklin D., not Teddy R., Franklin D. Roosevelt, along with different members of the government, would approach the Walt Disney Company and say, hey, listen, we know that the war efforts are going on, and because they are going on, especially eventually we would have the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and America got full-fledged into the war this year. Franklin Delano Roosevelt wanted to have it so the Disney Company would be recruited to join the war effort. And the way that they decided to recruit them was to have it so Disney would create propaganda film. So Disney, along with his animation department, would go through and they would create many different characters or many different storylines for the entire government to help promote the war efforts and to have it so people would donate their time or donate their money to help the U.S. and the Allies win the entire war. Also, very interesting thing is if you go through and watch some of those old war effort things, they're fascinating. First off, they're absolutely fascinating, and you should definitely check them out if you've never checked them out before. But a lot of the animation style was redone. But another one of the things that came out of all of this, and you can actually kind of see this over at Disney's Hollywood Studios, is if you ever go to Disney's Hollywood Studios, over by the Tower of Terror, there's like the little food court area on the left-hand side while you're facing it. If you go over there, there's two different restaurants there. And in both of the restaurants, if you look inside, you can find different planes that would be around the 1940s, like the World War II era. If you look at these different planes, you can see that on these planes, they have different insignias of Donald Duck or Daisy Duck or Mickey or Goofy on the sides of the planes, or Grumpy is one of them. And this is because at this point, even though these characters were technically owned by the Disney Company, the Disney Company allowed anyone who was in the war to use their characters for their planes if they so chose. So they actually opened up, so it was actually legal for them to use the different Disney characters. Actually, if you go over to Walt Disney Presents at Disney's Hollywood Studios as well, right before you enter into the Disneyland room on the right-hand side, the little man, the Buddy Epson doll, is on your left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you can actually find like different logos of the things. These were actual pictures that people had drawn onto their actual planes that were going off to war. So it all started here in 1941 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt approached Walt Disney and said, hey, can we use some of your characters to, help the war efforts? And Walt Disney, being a patriot, said, of course you can. So that is 1941. Not a whole lot happened in 1941, but still 1941 is fine and dandy. 1950 is fine and dandy as well, because we got one of the most beloved films of all time that came out in 1950. And we also got a little bit more of Disney history as well. All right, so let's start off with the first film that most people are probably thinking about, which is Cinderella. So Cinderella would be our first film that would come out in 1950, obviously taking the entire rags to riches storyline that we all know and love to this day, and also gave us some brand new beloved characters. Now, fun fact, up until this point, the story of Cinderella had been told multiple times in multiple mediums, mainly through different story books and simple things like simple books. But eventually in the 1920s, 1930s, there were a few different live action Cinderellas that would come out. But in 1950, when they came out with Cinderella for Disney, they did have it so Cinderella got a bunch of little friends, because prior to this, she never had these little mice friends that she would rely on. But then we had it so she had the side characters. And the main reason we had these side characters is because Disney and his animators realized that maybe Cinderella was kind of dull and boring if you don't have a little bit more and a little bit more side characters. added to the film, because otherwise it's a very simple, very basic film. So that's when we got the characters of Gus, Jacques, Susie, Perla, Bruno, um, Lucifer, and a whole lot more. So a lot of those different characters were created specifically for the 1950 film. So at the same time, in 1950, we also had a groundbreaking thing that would happen in the history of Disney storytelling. Now, prior to this, we did have two different films, So Dear to My Heart, along with Song of the South, which would be mixing animation along with live action. Also, way back in 1940, we would get the Reluctant Dragon, which would be a studio tour of what it's like for the animators to go through and create a film. A lot of live action, but a little bit of animation as well. But up until this point, Disney had never said, you know what, let's focus solely on a live action film that's all live action. We're not going to rely on any cutesy little cartoon characters to get us through the film. And in 1950, we got our very first full-length live-action film, and that would be Treasure Island. Not Treasure Planet, Treasure Island. Treasure Island would also have it so Disney would sign their very first contract with an actor, which would be Bobby Driscoll. Or actually, no, Bobby Driscoll had already signed it with So Dear to My Heart. So this would be his second film, So Dear to My Heart being his first one, and then we would have this one, and then Peter Pan would be his third. So Bobby Driscoll would be on board and playing the role of Jim Hawkins as they would go through and retell the entire classic story of Treasure Island. Now, the interesting thing about this film, if you've never watched it before, it does try to strive a lot more on the drama instead of a lot of the comedy that we had already known and loved with lots of different Disney films. However, I was going to say 2001, but that's the next person wrote down 2001. In 1950, we also got Disney's next little glimpse into live actionhood. Now, before 1950, if you wanted to go watch Walt Disney, you would watch him on the red carpet of things like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You would see him at the Oscars accepting one of his many, many, many Academy Awards. But if you wanted to see him any other way, there was really no way for him to really be seen anywhere. So in 1950, at the end of the year, Walt Disney decided that he was going to make his first public appearance on television, as he had a special 1-hour segment where Walt Disney went into Wonderland. So Walt Disney actually had it, so this was going to be his preview of his new film, Alice in Wonderland. If you've ever watched this, by the way, it's really funny because it's like they almost give you the whole movie. But there are also different segments of Walt Disney in there as well, talking to different kids. So in this film, prior to this, many people didn't really know who Walt Disney was. Like, they knew his name, but they didn't see his face at all. We just didn't really see Walt Disney in the same way, shape, or form that we would in a few years when the Disneyland television would premiere. Because of this, Walt Disney started to look a little bit more into the idea of television, and he actually started to really like the idea of television and decided to eventually, because of this little segment, it was literally a 1-hour segment, 1-hour special. I'm really missing my water right now. I forgot to fill it up before I left the park. I've got a bottle of water, but it's way over there. So I'll get that in a few minutes after we close. But when he did this, he realized that he really enjoyed the idea of television and enjoyed the idea of having it so it was a way for him to promote stuff. So because of this 1-hour special, we would eventually get things like the Disneyland television series, the Wonderful World of Disney television series, and a whole lot more came out of this 1-hour special. Okay, we're going to do our last one here, unless we got any new subscribers here. So if you want to have it so we keep on going through, send your friends over. I've not even looked to see what we're at right now. So we might be there. We might not be there. I have no idea. Right now, I'm just focusing solely on educating you on Disney. Okay, so 2001 is going to be our next one. Pulling up my notes for 2001. I can think of 3 things right now for 2001, but I know that I'm missing some things. 2001, A Space Odyssey. Okay, those are the 3 I thought of. That's what I was forgetting. Okay, so let's start off with the movie section once again. So this year would have it so we would open up a few different films. Our first one would be Atlantis, The Lost Empire, which, of course, at that point the idea was to have it so this would become a brand new spin-off series that would have many different adventures along the way, with Mila Thatch, played by Michael J. Fox, being the starring role. Unfortunately, the film did not do very well. In fact, this would be the first really big Disney loss that they had in quite some time. Well, not really, but it was the second year in a row that Disney would have a loss. Prior to this, in the 1990s, we had so many classic hits, such as in 1990 we had Rescuers Down Under, 91 Beauty and the Beast, 92 Aladdin, 93 no film, 94 was The Lion King, 95 was Pocahontas, 96 would be Hunchback of Notre Dame, 97 was Hercules, 98 was Mulan, 99 would be both Tarzan along with Fantasia 2000, which was technically the last day of the year, but still. And then in 2000 we had our first big bomb, which would be Dinosaur, and then later on that year we would also have The Emperor's New Groove, which didn't do well, and then we also had Atlantis: The Lost Empire in 2001. So with this, the animation department for Disney started to take a step back and say, maybe we just don't know what we're doing anymore. We've had 3 films that didn't really succeed compared to all the films that we had in the 90s that always succeeded. So Disney started to reconsider exactly what their take was going to be on the future, because also at this point, they had all these other films that were doing extremely well, like another film that came out that year, Monsters, Inc., but that was under the Pixar label, and Monsters, Inc. became a massive, massive, massive success. Now, we were just talking a lot about the Disney efforts in 1941 with World War II, so it just makes sense that also we would also have another huge film that Disney would produce this year, which would be Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor went on to become one of the biggest blockbuster films of all time. Like, seriously, it kind of blows my mind because not many people talk about Pearl Harbor anymore, but it was one of the most successful films of all time when it first came out. In addition to that, Disney started to go back and look a little bit at their Disney royalty, and they decided to bring back the most royal one of them all, Julie Andrews, in her first big screen film since Mary Poppins, which would be The Princess Diaries. In The Princess Diaries, she plays the grandmother of Genovia, where she's recruiting her granddaughter to take over the realm. In addition to that, we also had one final thing. Oh, actually, no, this is a really fun one. I forgot about this. In 2001, the DVD release of Snow and the Seven Dwarfs sold over 1 million copies on its first day. I don't know if anyone out there remembers this. I remember it like it was yesterday. Like no joke. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I was a senior in high school, and I was all set to watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I was like, it's a classic. It's the first film, blah, 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 blah. And they had the most beautiful DVD cover of all time. It was Snow White about to bite that apple. It was an amazing cover. It was purple. I remember this like legit. I remember this so well. I remember finishing school that day, going over to Best Buy because I had pre-ordered the movie. Went to Best Buy. I picked it up. Then I came back to school because I had fencing practice that day. And I remember showing everyone, look at what I got. Look what I got. And it was the first time that some of the people in high school realized what a big Disney nerd I was. And they said, why do you want that? And I was like, this is such a classic animation film. How could you not want it? But prior to this, Disney had not really released any of their films on DVD. DVD was still relatively new at this point. But I remember that they made such a big deal about Snow White coming out on DVD. And it was going to be the first of a wave of all the different animated classics. And you had to go get it. And I remember vividly going to get it that very first day, and I was blown away by all the different special features. And they had that interactive game. Oh my gosh, this is all like, it's all flooding back to me right now. It's not even the most exciting thing that happened in 2001, but it's bringing back memories. So also in 2001, which is a lot more entertaining and a lot more interesting, was this would be the very first time ever in the history of the Disney company where we had not just one, but 2 different Disney parks opening up in the same year. In February of 2001, we got Disney California Adventure over in Disneyland. Now, if you've watched the Imagineering story, then you probably know a little bit more about the backstory of this. But at this point, the Disney company wanted to have it so they just threw a bunch of parks together. Like, this was like corporate was saying, like, just throw these parks together. We just need to make some more money. like allow these people to go to a different park so we get them for 2 days instead of just one. And so for California Adventure, they just kind of threw a park together real quickly, and it really was not that big of a hit. It failed. Like Disney California Adventure was a failure when it first opened up, and a lot of people would go there, try it out for one day, and they'd say, you know what, never mind, we're going to go back over to Disneyland. It wouldn't be for another 7 or 8 years until it would actually be rethemed and become the California Adventure that we all know and love today. Does anyone remember California Adventure when it first opened up? I went there in 2006, 7. I think it was 2007. With my roommate from my college program. Him and I went down to Disneyland and California Adventure, and I remember not being blown away by really anything. I had done Soarin' over in Disneyland, and it was 2008 because it was the year that Toy Story Mania opened up. And I remember thinking Toy Story Mania was really cool, but everything else I was just like, it's okay, but it's not great. And then eventually it would take off and it become a huge hit. The other park that would open up in 2001 would be Tokyo Disney Sea, which I still have never been to. But Tokyo Disney Sea would be a partnership with the people who actually own Tokyo Disneyland. So Tokyo Disneyland is not actually owned by the Disney company. It's actually owned by a separate company. But 49% of the input is from Disney Imagineers. So Disney Imagineers technically build it, but they also have no budget because it's this whole other company that's actually funding and pretty much owns and operates the entire thing. And so because of that, we would get one of the most elaborate and one of the most thought out theme parks that Disney had ever created. Okay, and that brings us through 2001. All right, let's check our subscriber count here. My mouth is so dry right now. I cannot wait to open up my fridge later on and just get some water. Okay, we started off at 2847, and we are still at 2847. So, high school would have been so much easier for us, you and us, if you knew all your history, geometry, English, and Central facts, like you know your Disney facts. That's true. Hugh School. My mother, ladies and gentlemen. So, we are going to wrap up today's episode right here. As always, tonight's episode is sponsored by It's All About the Mouse Travel Jazz Hands. Make sure you stop by. It's allaboutthemousetravel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All their services are absolutely positively 100% free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. I'd like to thank everyone out there for joining us once again this week. Please keep on spreading the word about the Wednesday show and From Screen to Theme, and invite anyone and everyone to join the groups on Facebook or subscribe over here on YouTube as well. As always, remember that anything can happen if you let it. Until next week, have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Bye-bye now. Goodbye. Are they gone? Are they gone? Oh, good. My cheeks are just killing me. I just can't.